suddenly, right, there is a specific image generator or image manipulator that has made him really excited. And he has literally not paid attention to AI for the past 3 years. Bless him.
I'm not sure I would have bet the Studio Ghibli image generation of your family would beat being able to deeply research the internet and get information from like 200 sources and a really reasoned report from that in like 10 minutes.
I mean, that's incredibly useful, but it's not nearly as fun. I think you and I always thought that an LLM could never be a solution itself. IRR, NOI, all of these things that are really important, really high value decisions get made. I don't want to trust to a solution that is going to give me a different answer every time.
Cursor, V0, GitHub Copilot, and have changed how engineers work. Pretty accepted within the industry. They're becoming core to most people's data. All of our engineers, without fail, are very much thinking about how they can adopt tools like this to do better work. As consumers, you get extremely sensitive to the unedited AI output, double dash. I see one of those, and you're immediately like, oh, this was written by Claude.
Yep. Thanks, AI SDR. I don't want your product. Humans' taste always evolves in reaction to what is commonplace. There is always a rarefied taste. We just don't know what that is yet in an AI native world.
The complexity and sophistication of the work we're helping professionals with blows my mind, really, from where we started 3 years ago.
A lot of the stuff that we're doing today wasn't possible until 3 months ago.
Yes, quite. Which makes road mapping quite difficult when you're planning out your product roadmap.
Who needs one of those?
Yeah, quite. Yeah. Where I believe we're going to go pretty soon is that to understand whether the output of your work is right, you'll be skimming the core reasoning steps and looking for flaws or things you disagree with.
Welcome back to another episode of Bricks, Bytes, and Bold Moves, the future of real estate. I am Dr. Kate Jarvis, the CEO of Fifth Dimension, and I am once again today joined by my lovely co-founder and CPO, Johnny Morris.
Hello, everyone.
So today, I think what we're interested in talking about is what has captured the imagination of people over the past quarter about AI as it evolves, what's been hyped, what's been hip, what's good about it, what's bad about it, and also some of its applications, of course, to our space in real estate and how we're thinking of these as individual iterations towards a future where we're all enjoying a world that is AI native.
I think there's just been tons of big things that have dropped that people have got very, very excited about. And the relationship between AI innovation versus user experience or packaging innovation is actually more nuanced than you might expect.
I mean, it's personal now too, right? Because I don't know about you and your wife, but my husband also runs a business that is a financial services and technology business. And he's, been telling his board for ages they don't need an AI strategy, and he doesn't care, which I think is legitimate, right? Depending on the type of business you run and when it's going to really enter your stack in a meaningful way outside, let's say, of programming a bit differently and better, which we'll talk about more later. But he has messaged every WhatsApp thread that we have with the, make pictures of my son and my wife into a Studio Ghibli anime. Because suddenly, right, there is a specific image generator or image manipulator that has made him really excited. And he has literally not paid attention to AI for the past 3 years, bless him. So, that's one thing that I find really interesting because, of course, that was an update that was pushed out. There's been a lot of other products. There's been a lot of other variations of generate or edit an image for me. Why was this sort of the thing that has been all over the internet the past few days?
So this is ChatGPT's refresh of the image generation feature, right? For me, I think there's like a couple of things at play because I'm super mindful that actually this isn't necessarily unique technology-wise. Like Ideogram and Gemini both perform to a similar level. I think, firstly, launching it with a good prompt. Like the Studio Ghibli, like Recreate anything in Studio Ghibli is an amazing experience with any image generation model. And who's going to have done that before, right? Other than maybe nerds like ourselves. But it's Studio Ghibli is a favorite in the family. So it's actually been a popular testing bed for us. But I think immediately giving someone that kind of, here's something that you like that's very distinct, that you can get great results from, is one. And then I guess there is a underlying increasing kind of awareness, skill, understanding of AI tools that we're, a few years in now. And people, I think, are getting, you've got the kind of, let's say, late majority, or maybe it's the early majority, actually, who are kind of using more tools in their day-to-day life. And so I think are more ready for that next big, like, imagination-capturing moment. But who would have bet, I guess, that the Studio Ghibli... Well, it makes sense when you say it, but I'm not sure I would have bet the Studio Ghibli, like, image generation of your family would beat being able to deeply research the internet and get information from like 200 sources and a really reasoned report from that in like 10 minutes. Like the deep research features we now have everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, that's incredibly useful and obviously relevant to the work I do and that my husband does, but it's not nearly as fun. And I think there is something too about user interface, visual representations that is a bit different from, hey, I didn't want to read this thing and here are some words instead. Yeah. Here's, 10 words instead of 10,000.
I do wonder what percentage of deep research reports are read. I must admit, like, especially as a lot of that kind of like, hey, we're going to use ChatGPT or Gemini or in Perplexity, you go there, you put in a query, something happens, 15 minutes later you have to come back. Like that coming back part is not well dealt with in their interfaces, and you're not used to it, right? You're used to that response and those kind of synchronous tools in like in seconds rather than minutes. And I do wonder what percentage of reports are just like they're just made and then left there, never read. I guess like some ones written by humans.
Then again,
there's plenty of unread writing in the world.
That's true. But will I print for posterity any of the Studio Ghibli versions of photographs of me and my son? I know one of them's on my husband's home screen right now on his iPhone, but like I do, for example, I absolutely don't search the internet in the quote unquote normal way anymore. Yeah. All of these deep research engines have completely replaced going to a search engine and asking for a key phrase or the ways in which I've done this since the internet has been around. So one, I think represents a fundamental habit change that I think more and more people who are less nerdy than ourselves are starting to make. Is the other thing just good marketing? Is it indicative of a broader change in some sense?
Well, so as you well know, I'm a massive fan of the tools that help you kind of design and do UX and user interface design. And I feel like you can work with a tool like V0 or even with Claude or ChatGPT, and you can do work that would have, for designing products, that would have taken weeks, sitting down with like a group of different specialists much, much, much quicker, and ultimately to a better quality. And I guess that like visual expression and being able to get a visual response does let you explore a different set of stuff. Like you can explore how your house would look or what a new haircut would look like. I feel like it does open up a whole level of use cases that perhaps are fun, applicable to day-to-day life, and not things we are all naturally skilled at. Like, for example, where should my sofa go in my living room? Like, it's had 5 or 6 different positions. I'm not sure. Maybe I could get help with that now.
So there's like reimagine your business with AI.
Yeah.
And then there's reimagine your life, perhaps, with AI.
It's like the benefit of like, and I feel like for a long time, one of the key kind of mental models I've had for the benefits of AI is giving the kind of support that was only available to the most privileged, wealthiest people in the world, and making that available to kind of everyone. Like, like access to a tutor, for example, extremely expensive. Access to a ghostwriter, even more expensive. But now you can get access to something that, depending on the research you read, approximates a tutor for almost no cost or no cost. So I think of it as that sense of like, actually, in your personal lives, you now have access to all of these personalized services, or getting access. Like there's still a learning barrier, but you're getting access to all these personalized services that have previously only been available to a small number of people.
I'm afraid of where you're going next with this because I remember some news headlines about businesses like Lovable, where people are loving spending their weekends building at least prototypes of applications. I am hesitant to call them production-ready, scalable applications, as when real programmers try to use them, often the first button that's generated doesn't actually work, and it's very difficult to debug the code because suddenly you're thrust into a thorny world where you didn't define the architecture in the same way. But there is something to that, right? That the AI movement is, dare I say, democratizing access to tools that allow at least some of us to get a starter for 10, and perhaps more experienced professionals within that industry to do what they would do anyway in as skilled a way, just differently and faster.
I guess it depends on how much you think about the sort of generalist skill set, like versus specialism. As in, a lot of tools like that give someone who has lighter expertise in an area the ability to progress and articulate themselves and explore something without getting as far as a deep specialist, but still being able to explore, hey, what would it look like if I made a website that generated quizzes that were personalized for children, for example, which may be something I'd be messing around with in the background.
Is it better than Google Forms?
It is better than Google Forms, yes. Although it doesn't quite work how I want it to. Mm-hmm. But it is very pretty and it looks nice. But the UX, and this is a really interesting thing, the actual UX of it isn't what I wanted to create. And I'm still in the process of re-steering that back. And that's one of the really interesting things about, I guess, using generative tools for your work is most of these tools aren't designed out the box to do exactly what you want in a repeatable way. In fact, they're explicitly not designed for that. And sometimes that's great. Like when you think like, hey, what does my house look like?
10 different floor plans,
if
anything is structurally possible.
I was going to go for mock Tudor. Give me a mock Tudor version of my house, right? Or, Or what if I had a lovely courtyard in the middle of my room? That's quite different to when you want to get work done, where normally you want things to happen in the same way, it needs to be repeatable, and you need to get a specific thing.
You can't just brainstorm all the time?
No.
I would love for that to be my job.
Brainstorming is just a start, right? I mean, a CEO brainstorming is a big part of your job, though.
Yeah, I'm lucky in that sense.
AI assisted.
So how do you take it to the next level? And I'm also curious in your perspective on whether these tools, do you buy the thesis that, something like a Lovable, something that you can sit at home with no programming experience and get an application up and running in a couple hours or a couple days, is the underlying technology, I'm trying to think through what you're saying about an LLM and the limitations of those, etc. Is the underlying technology going to get good enough that this will just be, you could onboard 50,000 users tomorrow, it'll be perfect, everything will work? Are we 2 years from that? Or is that simply not the way the technology works or where it's headed?
So when this kind of question for me has a very conventional data science answer that getting to there's a very well-known concept in data science described in many different ways, but getting a model that's 70% accurate might be easy. 80% medium, 90% quite hard, 95% hard. Getting from 95 to 96% extremely hard. Getting to 96.1 extremely, really, really, really hard. Mm-hmm. And so I do think there's incredible stuff that we'll be able to build and speed which we'll be able to build. And the quality is all increasing and tools like Lovable will help us. But I don't think the complexity of building an actual system and scaling it will be so easy to just kind of vibe away, let's say. So website building, application building, but not system building is my general feeling there. Now, I think the people who do understand how to build systems will be able to build bigger, better, faster, cheaper. But there's still so much depth and complexity there that closing that the sort of the 5% of quality or reliability to build something that can actually scale will be years and years of work.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen that play out over the past 3 years since founding this business, right? Where certainly in 2023, a lot of people were very convinced if you just trained the crap out of a model on some very specific data, however you chose to do that, right, from the many possible methodologies, you would be able to at least, for some set of tasks, defined set of tasks, create an almost perfect solution out of an LLM.
Yeah.
But I think you and I always thought that an LLM could never be a solution itself.
No. It's part of a system, right? Both of us have been burnt too often by getting excited about a particular technology solution rather than the actual problem it solves, right? So being able to juice your software system or your business with a load of cheap intelligence, because that's what the models provide, is an incredible resource, an incredible tool, but you can't bear the limitations of LLMs in products that humans use, right? Like, for example, classic example here, and I think I spend a lot of time at the moment talking to people about the difference between a raw model, an LLM, its limitations, and a system that uses it. The classic example of this is an LLM, a model, is bad at maths, right? For all very good reasons, but not good for doing calculations. However, a system that uses an LLM to write mathematical formula and execute it in some kind of computing language is extremely good at analysis. And it's one of the things that I have a lot of sympathy for everyone trying to get their head around AI, particularly who doesn't have a technical background, isn't working with technology day to day, is as you're learning about the limitations and the nuances of a model, then trying to apply that to the systems you come across is mind-bendingly difficult, because they're two different things. It's kind of like the features of the ingredients are different to the finished dish.
But isn't it incredibly time-consuming and expensive to build a whole platform rather than just an LLM?
Of course. Turns out it is, unsurprisingly. And that's why we don't go around telling people, hey, you should build in-house, and why we didn't start a business that's mainly focused on training people how to build product with LLMs and have built our own product to help people get their work done. I think there's a general perception, and I can imagine me doing this in not as long ago as I'd like to admit, running a data science team of like, hey, we've got some data, we'll just fine-tune a model, I'm sure it'll be fine. You're like, okay, we've got a model, it's fine-tuned. How do we get the data in and out? And actually, it's quite hallucinating. How do we deal with that? And maybe we need another feature. Maybe it needs, maybe fine-tune this model to, to extract a specific type of financial table from a filing. It specifically extracts debt schedules from REIT filings. But now our customers or our internal users want a different type of table. And actually, this June model is really bad at that different type of table. And I think that then it's so easy to dead end. And so easy to then be like, I'll just tune a different model, or I'll add more data in. Whereas actually, you should be thinking about, what's my tool set? Is it actually a model problem? Is it a system problem? Is it an agentic problem, which is a whole nother level of fun? And that complexity, you immediately get hit in the face by it when you start working and delivering useful product to real users. But it's not obvious that is there. I mean, just think about model versions, right? Like, it feels like a lot of education I see is like, just learn all the models, right? So just learn the pros and cons of every model that's available to consumers and use the best one for the job.
Yeah.
That's great.
Easy task.
Yeah.
You learn, the fundaments of what an LLM is, what they're good and bad at. Then you try and compare cross LLMs that have different parameters. And already you could be looking at, a research paper, a peer-reviewed research paper that has a bunch of symbols in it you don't understand.
So quick. So quick.
So quick. You're down a rabbit hole. Yeah. And also every day someone has a new one. Whether people are talking about how cheap it is to build a model like DeepSeek and whether or not it's truly performant at scale, to whatever weirdly named new Anthropic model and trying to figure out whether it's actually better or worse than the last Anthropic model.
We all know OpenAI is the worst offender of model naming.
I feel like they just are, they're messing with me at this point.
I can imagine internal conversations where should we clean up our model naming? Nah, let's just keep going. It's fun. But I do think the number of people that have clicked on the little drop-down menu of which model do you want is a very small number of users. And actually, I don't think it'll be very long before everyone takes the approach we do, which is essentially to abstract away that complexity and say, hey, let us manage what's the best model for the job, and you focus on what you want to get, building the right context and kind of getting your work done.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely critical, as you're saying, to think about maintenance as well as the initial build, right? So many of the businesses that we talk to are like, we took GPT 3.5. We trained it on some of our internal data. Now, not only has the world moved on eons from a model standpoint, as we've just discussed, and then you're stuck with a sandbox version that can't do any of the things the cool new models can do. Whatever data you trained it on for the one or 3 tasks you thought that you wanted to make it performant on to begin with, you got 80% of the way there maximally. In most cases, it's probably more like 60%. And then you're like, wait a second, our business is always producing more data. And there's ever more historic data that isn't going into these models. And what about these 30 other use cases the business has told us they need to prioritize from an automation perspective? What do we do?
Yeah, sounds overwhelming just talking about it, to be honest.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think, as you say, it's easy to get as deeply technical and people who are just interested in the next new thing generally. Early on in building this business, I probably would have said oh man, determinism is so out of fashion. But actually the business that we continue to build is probability combined with the right amount of determinism in architecture is magic. It's actually there are things you do need to algorithmically define. For example, a Walt calculation has specific variables in it, and it's leveraged or unleveraged. And it's, within this particular context that you might want an LLM to understand exactly what the thing is and not mess you about on its definition.
I would also quite like my IRR calculations to always use the same methodology, for example.
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice? At least within the same business.
Yeah.
IRR, NOI, all of these things that are really important, really high value decisions get made off the back of, I don't want to trust to a solution that is going to give me a different answer every time.
Yeah. Well, yeah. A solution that gives me an answer every time does sound a lot like humans, though.
Yeah.
And putting my hand up, it's a feature and a bug.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, what do you think is really... Where is the AI revolution finding the most purchase today, would you say?
That's an excellent question. So if we think about universal adoption, within software engineering is the first place that comes to mind. And that is because software engineers all kind of have the same workflow. They have very well-defined tools and languages they work with. And a lot of the people building LLMs are software engineers or adjacent to software engineers. And so that space has had a ton of investment and there's been tons of progress. And that's why you have things like Lovable, for example, which isn't really a tool for software engineers, but the tools that have similar underlying technology like Cursor and V0 and GitHub Copilot and have changed how engineers work. And I think if you weren't using those tools, you're going to be at a disadvantage to someone using them. Now, how you use them is a debate, but it's, I think, pretty accepted within the industry that they're becoming core to most people's day job. Now, obviously, I have some bias here because we're in an AI startup, and all of our engineers, without fail, are very much thinking about how they can adopt tools like this to do better work, and always thinking, is now the time that actually I can have 50 agents building all these different elements of our software for us? Not yet, no. And then beyond that, I think you've got kind of marketing, and the big, going back to the start of the conversation, the biggest kind of, I guess, question mark or raised eyebrow comes from the sort of marketing agencies, creators, design studios of like, this is worryingly good. Like, are marketeers in future just going to be making adverts by typing into an advert making super bot?
But every person will still have 3 hands, and you're
Yeah.
like, where did that third hand come from?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think that I think you can get at least like 2 hands and 9 fingers.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
But your point is right. So you'll notice that there's a lot of examples that you might have seen of kind of like flyers being recreated and stuff like that. The fonts are always slightly wrong though, and they're slightly misaligned. And so I do think that lots of marketing teams and agencies will do some awesome stuff, and there will be work that disappears. But everyone is going to get so sensitive to that. It's like the double dashes in text right now. So I think Claude in particular is very likely to give you a double dash. I see one of those, and you're immediately like, oh, this was written by Claude.
Yep. Thanks, AI SDR.
Yeah,
I don't want your product.
Yeah. And then you see Delve, and you're like, oh, that was GPT 4.0. There's another one for GPT 4.5. I can't remember. But I feel like as consumers, you get extremely sensitive to unrefined, unedited kind of AI output. And so our expectations are going to continue to raise on like what we want and the quality of what we want.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know there's some debate, right, in scientific research communities about whether or not this is true. How accurately can people actually identify content that has been generated by AI or not? But I think it's most of it that I've seen is nonsense, specifically because what it's saying is it's hard to differentiate between content that has at one point been touched by an AI, right? And then massaged by a human being extensively versus it was never touched by an AI, right? Because point of fact, most of us, especially who want to be taken seriously in the world, are not just copy pasting stuff and putting it on the internet. There are these tells that sophisticated users are aware of. We simply edit them out, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I think to your point, what AI might get better at is understanding your personal tone of voice and being able to recreate it, for example. But humans' taste always evolves in reaction to what is commonplace. There is always a rarefied taste. We just don't know what that is yet in an AI native world.
Exactly. I think as well, because that's very much the view of like end-to-end automated AI without much human involvement. If you look at, okay, well, what about human-driven solutions where you've got humans working kind of with automated workflows or steps of workflows? I think the world is full of wildly exciting stuff going on there. And the kind, I see the most in the customers we work with. And, the mind-bogglingly difficult challenges that we're helping them solve. You think of sort of 500 megabyte spreadsheets that don't even open on computers that we can kind of, we could extract useful information on, maybe it's a forever comps database and really make a dent into, say, your IC paper workflow generation or your portfolio reporting every quarter. And what I'm seeing is that we're really able to deliver huge value in those complex workflows. That is speeding up the way businesses can appraise, look at, decide on deals or asset management decisions and stuff like that. And that is live and happening now. So I have this weird thing because I'm naturally very, very skeptical when I hear like, oh my God, there's a new image generation feature from ChatGPT and it means that there will be no more marketing agencies. And I'm immediately, no, that's not true because of this and this. However, the complexity and sophistication of the work we're helping professionals with blows my mind, really, from where we started 3 years ago.
Yeah, it's true. And a lot of the stuff that we're doing today wasn't possible until 3 months ago.
Yes, quite. Which makes road mapping quite difficult when you're planning out your product roadmap.
Who needs one of those?
Yeah, quite, yeah.
Just continue vibing it and everyone moves forward. But I do think there's something interesting about complex workflow automation, which I hear you would call agentic behavior depending on whether you're in San Francisco or in London, which is a debate for another time. But what humans are bad at, and anyone who's ever had a manager knows that this is true, is decomposing their own workflows.
Yeah.
So how do you describe, like some people, I've met some exceptional teachers who I admire very deeply. I'm not one of these people. And I think most common, actually, is you sit down with someone, let's say in real estate in our industry, and you're like, okay, that's really interesting. You got this, quarterly performance report for this portfolio of Aldis that you manage. Like, how do you turn this into financial data that your business uses to make decisions? And you're just like, oh, yeah, it's easy. I open these 10 things. I go to Argus and do that. I go to Snowflake and do this. I go to Salesforce. And, then it's done. And the way even in which it's described superficially makes it sound like it takes 10 minutes and is 4 steps.
Yeah.
If you actually sit down and watch someone do it, of course, it's hundreds, if not thousands of steps and many hours.
In terms of 250 people are involved in it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's just the one person who's touching it in that instance, not the reality of how people collaborate on it. And it's like, there was, I think, a moment in time that now is starting to pass because consumers are getting more sophisticated, though, where they couldn't understand how smart computers were or are getting with Gen AI native technology because they were actually not understanding how complicated the work they themselves do is.
Yeah.
So when reproduced by a computer, they're like, oh, no big deal. You just looked at some lease documents and decided what the rent is today. And you're like, wait, hang on a second. These are conflicting covenants. You don't know which one is supposed to supersede another. You don't know why the rent escalated. You actually had a meeting about this with all of the expensive people in your business to decide what the answer was. Why do you think this is a simple problem? But now, one of the reasons I think this is changing is because people are starting to show reasoning back.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And again, I feel like we're very into UX and packaging changes having outsized impacts on people's perception of the technology, unsurprisingly perhaps. But showing reasoning back to users just highlights a whole level of behavior and complexity and sophistication of a system that isn't intuitive for most people, is that? And also emotionally, I think most people are like, that sounds like what I would do. That sounds very human. What?
Yeah, I mean, it's fun when we watch our AI talk to itself in successive reasoning steps. And it's like, oh, that's so interesting, Ellie. You thought that the valuation of this property was, 15 million and not 14 million because it's currently been degraded by more precipitation than expected over the past 24 months. But that valuation doesn't match any of the historic valuations for assets like these. You idiot, ... right? Yeah. You're like, oh yeah, this does sound like my colleagues and I are sharing some professional experience here.
I think how you package that and surface and make it useful, though, is really important. Because showing it as a ta-da, this is cool, is very powerful. And I think it helps people engage with the system. But, I mean, I'm just thinking about how many thousands of lines of reasoning would be generated by complex workflows. It might be a short book or a long book.
You would ask an LLM to summarize it for you. You'd be like, please tell me what's important here.
But I think it's more. There's more to it than that. It's taking the right steps and understanding whether they're relevant and then surfacing them. Essentially, there's reasoning the reasoning.
Nice. I think that's the future.
Yeah.
Is that where you think it's going to head?
That's how we will audit our work in future. I'm pretty sure on this. No, I'm going to take a bet. I'm certain that in the old world, let's say, we were getting some data out of a PDF or a document, and we would have it up side by side with Excel, and we'd be tapping it in or trying to copy and paste. So we got PDF of some financial data. A few years ago, then maybe that's a system that has extracted that table partially, and we're correcting it and we're checking it side by side. And everyone's instincts is to pull up that kind of financial performance report next to the LLM output and compare it side by side again. Where I believe we're going to go pretty soon is that to understand whether the output of your work is right, you'll be skimming the core reasoning steps and looking for flaws or things you disagree with. So, which will allow you to manage and direct more intelligent systems, and mean that it's much, much rarer that you have to go deep into the kind of source documents, etc.
Fabulous. So I think
it's like referencing through reasoning.
Yeah, I think that's right. Then you know when to deep dive and when not to. Obviously, selfishly, I'm thinking about my own job again. And what I want is people to present information or insights to me in a way that I can use my experience and professional intuition to say, great, I accept that output is basically good enough. I don't need to see that again. However, over here, this smells wrong to me based on the reasoning that you've provided. And therefore, I'm going to stop this work that's in motion. I'm going to redo this analysis. I'm going to talk to this team. And perhaps in the future, that's my COO agent arguing with my CFO agent, arguing with... But that's probably more like 5 or 10 years out at least, as opposed to what we're talking about, I think, is this year.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're already working on how we already surface reasoning intelligently in different parts of the product, particularly in data analysis and more financial workflows. And we are working on how to kind of put a stop to a workflow going awry, the surfacing that reasoning in a way that's live enough that you can kind of hit a button and be like, whoa, hold on. No, don't calculate the walk that way. That's the wrong method. In this instance, I'm actually going to do it differently because of this, and this. And maybe you're missing a document I've just realized, so here's this document. That's all coming very, very soon.
Amazing. Well, thank you for this recap, State of the Nation. And I look forward to seeing what the next few months bring.
Absolutely. Look forward to talking about it soon.